Thanks, Andrew. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 2 men have been charged with the murder of a semi-professional footballer who was killed on Boxing Day in Birmingham. 23-year-old Cody Fisher was fatally stabbed at the Crane nightclub in Digbeth. 21-year-old Cammy Carpenter and 22-year-old Remy Gordon have also been charged with affray. They'll appear before magistrates on Monday. A third man has been bailed while West Midlands police continue their inquiries. Pope Francis has paid tribute to former Pope Benedict, who passed away this morning, aged 95. The pontiff described his predecessor as noble and kind. Earlier, King Charles sent his condolences, recalling Pope Benedict's constant efforts to promote peace and goodwill. Becoming head of the Catholic Church in 2005, Pope Benedict stepped down in 2013, the first pope to do so in 600 years. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Dr. Rowan Williams, spoke to us about Pope Benedict's visit to the UK.
The first time that a pope had officially visited the United Kingdom, certainly the first time that Pope and Archbishop had stood together at that shrine. And for me, it was a moment of extraordinary depth to be alongside this very, very great, very substantial man and be able to pray together and, if you like, to discover our unity at the deepest level.
4 Lionesses who won the Women's Euros earlier this year are among those recognised in the New Year Honours List, the first to be issued by King Charles. Captain Leah Williamson has been made an OBE, whilst Lucy Bronze, Beth Mead and Ellen White have been given MBEs. GB News presenter Anne Diamond has received an OBE for services to public health and charity. And Queen guitarist and animal welfare campaigner Brian May has received a knighthood. The government has confirmed that anyone travelling directly from China to England from the 5th of January must show a negative COVID test before departing. There are no direct flights from China to Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, but the government says it will work with devolved administrations to ensure measures are implemented there too. It's amid concerns of surging cases in China following an easing of restrictions there. France, Spain and the US have also introduced similar rules. And over in Yorkshire, Scarborough Council have been forced to cancel tonight's New Year's Eve celebrations thanks to an unexpected visitor, an Arctic walrus. It's thought to be the first time one's been spotted in the county. The animal has drawn crowds to the harbour on New Year's Eve. Wildlife experts say he's likely taking a break before continuing his journey north. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Andrew.
Welcome to a special edition of the Mark Dolan Tonight Show. With me, Andrew Doyle. We've got a cracking show this New Year's evening coming up. In The Big Question, after a review by the Campaign for Common Sense revealed the BBC was guilty of allowing left-wing ideology to seep into its programming, is the broadcaster promoting a partisan agenda? That's up at 9:20. And in my big opinion next, I'll be arguing that for all the depressing aspects of 2022, we have good cause to enter the new year in a spirit of optimism. At 10:20, I'll be sitting down with the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane, as we reflect on some of the biggest moments in politics from 2022 and take a look ahead to 2023. In the news agenda, throughout the show, my all-star panel. I've got former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, the political commentator Alice Grant, and journalist and broadcaster Mike Parry. We'll debate the big stories of the day, including whether Christianity still has a place in modern-day Britain. Plus, we'll take a look at tomorrow's front pages. Total firecracker of a show. You won't want to miss it. Let's go. There is no sadder sight than a young pessimist, except an old optimist. I think it was Mark Twain who said that. It certainly sounds like the sort of thing he would have said. But is it the case that optimism is a folly, something we ought to grow out of? With all the terrible news this year, it's very easy to be negative about the state of the world. War in Ukraine, cost of living crisis, a government that changes its leader more often than Matt Hancock changes his principles. But for all that, and given that it's New Year's Eve, I thought it might be a good idea to take the optimistic approach, to focus on the positive outcomes of 2022, and there have been a few. First, let's start with the state of free speech in this country. Now, for a long while, our police force was routinely investigating citizens for non-crime. All it would take is for someone to call the police and say they had read an offensive remark on Twitter, and the person who tweeted it would suddenly be guilty of a non-crime hate incident, which would be recorded on their files, often without their knowledge. And this was serious because these records of non-crimes would show up in disclosure and barring service checks and prevent people from getting jobs. But 2022 was the year which saw the end of non-crime hate incidents. This was in no small part due to the efforts of Harry Miller from Fair Cop, who fought this all the way to the Court of Appeal. At first, the police ignored the ruling, but it looks like they won't be able to ignore the law forever. Chris Philp, the policing minister, has now explicitly said that he will be instructing all chief constables to stop recording non-crime. Definitely a step in the right direction. And although the government is still persisting with its draconian online safety bill, which has all sorts of perilous ramifications for free speech, at least this year they agreed to drop the legal but harmful clause. So this would have meant that social media platforms would have had a legal responsibility to remove content that wasn't against the law, but was considered harmful, whatever that means. The amendments to the bill have come about because of the work of a number of campaigners, not least Toby Young's brilliant Free Speech Union, a group that certainly deserves our support at a time when politicians seem to think that words can be a form of violence. This has also been a brilliant year for those of us who have tried to draw attention to the dangers of gender identity ideology, a movement that threatens the rights of women and gay people while posturing as progressive. And although the SNP has pushed through its gender self-ID laws, which will mean people can simply declare themselves the opposite sex without a medical diagnosis, a law that is doubtless open to exploitation, this isn't the end of the story. As a result of Nicola Sturgeon's intransigence, her total refusal to engage intelligently with people's concerns, and the SNP's insistence that putting male-bodied criminals in female prisons poses no threat whatsoever to vulnerable women, lots of people are now waking up to a problem of which they had been previously unaware. And thanks to the courage of feminists and public figures like J.K. Rowling, more and more are starting to understand that these activists who claim to be on the right side of history are, in fact, illiberal, regressive, and often the most vicious bullies of all. The SNP, for instance, thinks it's a good thing that single-sex rape crisis centres for women in Scotland are scarce, because they think it's a form of bigotry to exclude men who identify as women. Well, this year J.K. Rowling set up Byra's Place, a female-only centre for victims of sexual abuse, another great step forward. And with the closure of the Tavistock, an NHS gender paediatric clinic that was fast-tracking confused children onto puberty blockers and surgery, and with the charity Mermaids finally being investigated by the Charity Commission, awareness is growing of just how reactionary gender identity ideology really is, relying, as it does, on outmoded stereotypes of men and women, and pushing the idea that being same-sex attracted is something to be ashamed of. With each of these little victories, we're essentially seeing the damage that has been done by culture warriors over the past decade gradually being remedied. Things will probably get a lot worse before they get better. No doubt future historians will look back on our time in bewilderment, wondering why it was that so many in positions of authority suddenly started calling for censorship of opinions they disagreed with, struggling to answer the question, what is a woman, and smearing decent people as racists, transphobes, and even fascists for holding views that the vast majority of the population share. But maybe 2022 will be seen as the year when society began to sober up from its temporary bout of dipsomania. And this year, we've also been reminded what true activism looks like. We've got so used to posh kids gluing themselves to motorways or works of art, or students at Oxford and Cambridge screaming about their victimhood in their plummy upper-middle-class accents, that maybe we've forgotten that activism can be an essential motor for actual progress. In Iran, women have been taken to the streets, burning their hijabs and dancing in spite of the laws against such activity. When 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was killed in custody by the so-called morality police, the women of Iran decided they had had enough. And although attempts to overthrow the regime in Iran have usually been quashed in the early stages, this one looks like it might succeed. So, those are just a few positive moments from an otherwise difficult year. And I, for one, hope that 2023 ends up giving us even more reasons to be cheerful. So, reacting to my Big Opinion monologue tonight are my brilliant panel of former editor of Labelist Peter Edwards, political commentator Alice Grant, and journalist and broadcaster Mike Parry. I'm going to come to you first. Peter, any thoughts about this year? Has it been a good one for you? Are you happy? Are you going into the next year with a sense of optimism?
Well, I think, like everyone, it's a mixture of good and bad. You know, you look at national events, there's a moment of great sadness, for example, with the passing of Queen, but actually that was a time when the nation came together. There were positives. It was a celebration of a great life dedicated to public service, and it brought communities together. Listening to your monologue was very interesting, because I'm so used to perhaps challenging quite vigorously the presenter of this show and disagreeing occasionally. But I think we should try to be optimistic. I do agree with you on that, even though we're in very difficult times. I'm worried about the economy. I'm depressed by the government with inflation at 10 or 11%, and I feel the government isn't listening. But we've also seen in moments of crisis over the last couple of years, whether it's COVID or economic times, of communities coming together, helping out each other, whether it's on a personal level, a community level, like food banks and churches and all types of religious groups. There's a greater respect, I think, almost than ever before for elements of public service like the NHS. So I think Britain faces desperate times, but there are reasons, perhaps, I might not use the word optimistic, but there are reasons to be hopeful because of the courage and decency we've seen in British life over the last year.
Don't people, I mean, I'd say, Alice, don't people undermine or underestimate humanity and the capacity for human beings to work together? We constantly focus on the negative, not just in the media, but on social media. It gets a bit wearing, doesn't it?
Yes, for sure. And I think just today, with the news of the death of Pope Benedict, it's been quite a shock, I think, for the Catholic community, which I am part of as well. But also, there is a sense of unity, I think, with that, you know, we're looking ahead to a new year. And there's, of course, reasons to be optimistic. I also agree very much with Peter's analysis about the state of the economy and our political class at the moment. You know, we still have to keep an eye, in a way, on, you know, on trying to advance the agenda for common sense and for, I guess, you know, a better and a fair economic society. But there are reasons, of course, to be hopeful. So
yeah, Mike, do you share this optimism?
Well, I'm going to be very selfish about this, right? I'm going to say, how do I feel about it, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, I'm a property investor and property's going that way, right?
Yes.
Does not make me feel good. I also have some money in bank and building society accounts.
Yeah.
But it's not getting me any interest. I thought because inflation had gone up, I was going to get some interest on this. It's not happening.
Yeah.
It's a mismanagement of the economy. And, of course, 11% in inflation is not helping me pay my bar bills and the restaurant bills that I like to, you know, share with my friends and that kind of stuff. So it's a bad year from that point of view.
Yeah.
That's a completely and utterly personal and selfish point of view. But I do think that at the end of the day, most of us look at life and think, how have I done? Rather than the wider, you know, picture of how is society doing.
And we do focus about the economy very much, but are you at least confident in the Conservative government's claim that they will be able to bring those inflation limits down from double digits, that they, you know, that Jeremy Hunt's plan will work?
Well, it'll be nothing to do with Jeremy Hunt. It'll be to do with the price of energy around the world, won't it? What we've learned... remember, this war's only been going on since February this year, so it's in like 10 months now. And already the world has adopted very well to finding alternative sources of energy, of fuel. I mean, we see massive tankers coming from the Middle East now that never used to come here, bringing us, you know, liquid gas and that kind of stuff. We see tankers coming across the Atlantic, bringing us shale gas from America. That's going to bring fuel prices down, and we're going to be able to wean ourselves off Russian gas forever, which long-term for Putin is... So what I'm saying
because I think Peter might have a different view on this. What do you think?
Well, as I said at the start, I'm very depressed by the Conservative handling of the economy, but I think it's not a party political point.
Yes.
The economy is cyclical, and independent economists have said inflation's going to flatten out. And that won't necessarily happen because of anything Jeremy Hunt has done. Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, drove the car off the road. If Jeremy Hunt is grabbing the steering wheel and fiercely trying to drag it back onto the left-hand side, I don't know if that's a plan, that's just a modicum of common sense. But
you would also accept that Rishi Sunak took the reins at a particularly bad time, given the global economy. You know, we can't do everything at his door.
But you know what's interesting is that I think a lot of the kind of economic effects we're experiencing now can still be traced back to the decisions made during the lockdown period and during COVID.
I totally agree with you.
And the complete, like, irresponsible management of our economy by the Conservative government. And I think what's interesting as well is that even now we still have to be careful of this, because as we've just seen with China and that kind of, surging COVID cases scare, that this is something that could still potentially come back again, a form of, strangling the economy once again with lockdown policies.
I don't think it will, Alice.
Well, let's hope not, but the propaganda is already
made some very good points,
seeping into the media.
But I think because of the vaccination programme we had and all that, I think COVID is now treated like a mild complaint rather than the disease that we thought it was. But on the economy, just going down, Liz Truss, 44 days as Prime Minister, but she did have two very good ideas. Put down taxes and try and stimulate growth in the economy. So I would expect Rishi Sunak to pick some of that up, because it's good economic policy if you're talking about the way the Conservatives should do it.
Finally, Peter, just to come back on Mike's point, I mean, what was really so bad about Liz Truss's ideas? Was it not the case that the intervention of the IMF, for instance, was part of the problem? The markets reacted badly, but aren't they necessarily to blame?
There's a bit of a myth here, and I know you push for time. There is no political party that is against growth, right? It's not like Liz Truss had invented growth and it hadn't occurred to anyone else, whether Ed Miliband or Corbyn or David Cameron or
somebody else was pushing it,
or whoever. The idea that you borrow public money for tax cuts and then deliver tax cuts for some of the richer people, it is daft. And there are many things that flawed Liz Truss, one of which was ideology, but the other one was competence or the lack of it.
Well, I, for one, feel sorry for her on a human level, just because she ended up being the Lady Jane Grey of politics. It was a bit sad, in and out within, a couple of weeks. Anyway, after a report into BBC programming revealed that the broadcaster is allowing a left-wing, politically correct bias to infuse the storylines of drama series, we're going to be debating whether the BBC is promoting a partisan agenda, and that's coming up in just a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. It's time now for the big question. This is the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. A report by the Campaign for Common Sense has revealed that the BBC is allowing a left-wing, politically correct bias to infuse the storylines of drama series. After reviewing more than a year's output of BBC drama, the organisation suggested that the Beeb was indulging in its own form of social engineering by over-representing minorities and lecturing viewers on topics including climate change. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Campaign for Common Sense said, "The BBC needs to understand that not everyone signs up to a worldview where the bad guys are the police, Brexit and Conservatives." This latest review comes after a separate report accused the broadcaster of rewriting history by using documentaries to promote a woke agenda. But what do you think? Is the BBC promoting a partisan agenda? Well, joining me now to debate this is Director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, and former BBC journalist, Martin Bell. Thank you both ever so much for joining me today. Peter, I just want to come to you first about this. What do you feel about this, this report and this suggestion that the BBC is partisan when it comes to these ideological issues?
Well, I'm almost tempted to say, is the Pope Catholic? I mean, the fact is, Andrew, that the bias in the BBC, its worldview, which it sees as being just the kind of view that any civilized person would have, it's not a party partisan view, it is a political partisan view. That now goes through all of its output. It has done for a very long time, I'd say in a very extreme way for about the past 20 years. I think when it comes to news, people are far more aware of it now. Where it's far more insidious is in the areas in which, for example, you just highlighted, in drama, in comedy, in documentary making. And I think these two reports are very timely, but at the same time, they're not actually saying anything new. Fact is, this has been the case. The New Culture Forum has looked at this over the past 10 years on numerous occasions. What is important about this? I would say that people would say, well, in fact, don't watch the BBC then. We have to pay for it to watch it. That is the crucial difference, I think, between that and, say, like ITV or Channel 5 or Channel 4 or any of these others. Effectively, you know, we have to pay for this propaganda. And I think that it's getting to the point now where things are becoming unwatchable.
OK, Martin Bell, can I bring you in on this? Is Peter Whittle being too strong when he describes this as propaganda?
The BBC that I hear being spoken of here and spoken of by this Campaign for Common Sense that I've never heard of before, I do not recognise as the BBC for which I worked and for which I actually risked my life all over the world. It has a reach which is widely admired. It is admired all over the world. And I think as the national broadcaster, we're extremely fortunate to have it.
Fair enough. Peter, would you like to respond to that? I mean, specifically, can I just ask, it is difficult, isn't it, for the BBC, because they get accused of bias from the left and from the right, you know, depending on the viewer's individual perspective. Isn't that just the same in this case?
No. It's absolutely not, Andrew. I think that, you know, first of all, you can see it in viewing figures. You know, there's a saying, isn't there, go woke, go broke. I think that we're, to an extent, seeing that with the BBC as well. You know, we've looked at programmes in the New Culture Forum from, you know, the early 2000s. There was a drama series called Spooks, for example, which was so biased in the way that it presented the threat to British society that it was almost laughable. And I think that what I would say to Martin is that, yes, that might well have been the case for the BBC in terms of reporting. No one is doubting that it has a reputation worldwide. But there comes a point where you think, well, you know, the worldview, which is left-wing, which is put forward by the BBC, is this thing reformable? Could it be changed? And frankly, I've been sort of like, you know, hammering on about this for long enough now to think, actually, you know what? it can't be changed.
Martin Bell,
it can't be reformed. It can't be reformed. The people
Peter,
who
let me just bring
make
Martin
the
in a moment
dramas,
there.
who produce them and direct them, generally speaking, have exactly the same attitude when it comes to Brexit, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to multiculturalism, when it comes to climate change. And just to say one thing, Andrew, if I may there. In a way, the way you can tell the bias is by what is not on screen. So, for example, the idea that there might be a drama which was in some ways critical of mass migration, that is inconceivable on the BBC.
OK, but let's see what Martin has to say about that, because I think, Martin Bell, you make a very good point that this is an institution that has been venerated for a long, long time. It's done some incredible work. Do you accept that a lot of this kind of issues that Peter is describing there, a lot of these have sort of escalated over the past 8 to 10 years, and really this is a very modern problem, and that maybe the BBC should be looking at trying to establish greater diversity of opinion rather than just focusing on other forms of diversity?
I don't recognise this caricature of the BBC. Society has changed. I joined it in 1962. Society has changed immeasurably. It has changed with those times. And it's a proper news channel. It's not an opinion channel. I was under no political pressure, and I did a lot of politics for 34 years for one thing or the other. The only pressure I was under, which I did resent, was not to be allowed to show the real-world effects of war, because they said that would upset the viewers. That's the only pressure I ever felt I was under. So I don't recognise this as an issue.
Do you accept, though, that the kind of things you're describing there are specifically related to news and journalism, but actually this issue is more to do with drama and the cultural side of the BBC, whereas they might be better at handling or being impartial when it comes to the political side? Maybe when it comes to the cultural side, the concerns that Peter is raising, there are failures. I mean, even Tim Davie has said that there are failures in that respect.
There will always be failures in any organisation, even yours, because people are human. And human fail from time to time. But I think if the BBC realises that its audience is getting collectively unhappy, it always adjusts, and it will do so again. Look, the Alexandra Palace I joined in '62 was all white. There were no minorities. Now minorities are all over, and that was bound to happen, and it doesn't bother me at all. But obviously the BBC has adjusted and will adjust, and we're lucky to have it.
So, Peter, can I ask you about that? Because maybe, is there a case here to be made? As Martin says, there was, at some point, definitely a need for some sort of push for diversity within the BBC, but maybe now we're seeing what has been termed by Douglas Murray, for instance, as an overcorrection. Do you think, maybe, as Martin suggests, it will recorrect itself again, and this is just part of the process?
Why will it re-correct itself? I don't see that follows at all. I mean, in terms of the minorities, yes, of course, hugely disproportionately overrepresented now. That's not just on the BBC. Ask anyone about ads on ITV, for example. I mean, that's a whole different area where people no longer actually recognise what they are, the country they're meant to be living in. But I think that the crucial point here is that Martin is talking all the time about news. And, I think the news is biased at the BBC. I think perhaps when he joined it, it wasn't. But I think that far more important, because it's far more underhand, is the kind of bias and the kind of subjects which are chosen and the way they're represented in drama, in comedy, and in the non-news areas. So, as I said, it's become a bit of a cliche that, comedy panel shows on BBC Radio are almost all left-wing. You must know this yourself, Andrew. I mean, it is one of the biggest complaints of comedians that one hears about. But as I said earlier, and I think this is a crucial thing, when it comes to the kind of drama that the BBC was rightly, and I grew up on it, Martin, I mean, I really did. The BBC was rightly known as being the absolute benchmark. It no longer is, because the ideological agenda now actually gets in the way of good drama.
Well,
Effectively, they have to keep making the points this is a good person, this is a bad person.
Yes, I understand. We are running short on time, so I just want to come to Martin Bell just finally, and just to say, and I accept completely, Martin, that you don't recognise the depiction of the BBC that Peter is offering. But leaving that aside, on principle, do you accept the view that the BBC should be striving to represent all types of opinions and ideas throughout the country, and perhaps there is a failing, given where it is based, given the type of people that are employed there, that, as you say, they're human beings, so by necessity they end up representing one side more weightily than the other?
No, I don't recognise this caricature at all. Of course, I mean, GB News clearly has an interest in disparaging the BBC because you're a rival. You'd love to have its ratings, you'd love to have its reach. Maybe you will. Is it really the biggest question of the day, that the BBC is allegedly biased? I absolutely believe it isn't.
OK. I mean, I don't consider it necessarily the biggest story of the day, but it's a story we're responding to that was in the papers.
I would say that the cultural effect of the BBC is now one that undermines Britain, whereas in the past, maybe it celebrated Britain. But by a kind of chipping away, as these two reports show, often in very small ways, it's demoralizing to the culture. This is the national broadcaster. The licence fee should be scrapped, and maybe that will induce them to have a bit more common sense. I'm
going to have to stop you there, Peter, because we are out of time. But thank you to my guests, the director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, and former BBC journalist Martin Bell. Coming up after the break, my all-star panel and I will be debating whether the honours system is flawed and in need of reform after a senior civil servant who failed in his department made the list. So what are your thoughts? Send them to me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. And we'll be back shortly.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. And joining me throughout my show is my lovely all-star panel. I've got the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, political commentator Alice Grant, and journalist and broadcaster Mike Parry. The 2023 New Year's Honours List has been released, and while the likes of Queen guitarist Brian May and Lionesses captain Leah Williamson deservedly made the cut, there were some questionable additions to the list. Among the honorees is the Home Office's most senior civil servant who oversaw the department's calamitous failure to tackle the surge in small boats crossing the Channel. Matthew Rycroft, the Home Office's permanent secretary, took up the role in March 2020, with the number of migrants crossing illegally hitting record highs since. But despite his failures, Rycroft has managed to bag a knighthood. And maybe it should be no surprise that a failed civil servant managed to grab a title, considering Honours Committee officials have warned of a growing use of so-called fixer firms who charge thousands of pounds to write polished applications on behalf of nominees. One firm, for example, aptly titled Awards Intelligence, claims to have a success rate over 65% in achieving New Year and birthday honours, compared with an estimated average success rate of 10%. So with the honours system appearing to be broken, is it time we reformed it? My all-star panel is back with me now, and I'd like to hear their views on this. Peter, I'll come to you first. Any thoughts?
I'm not sure the honours system is broken per se. And if you scroll through the papers, there's tens of thousands of honours given out. Most of them don't get the public profile. They're people who have achieved excellence in other fields, whether that's sporting success or, as we were saying earlier, often a lifetime of community service, toiling away for perhaps unfashionable causes and getting modest recognition, which is much deserved. In terms of Rycroft and the Home Office, what I'd say on that is, I don't want to make everything party political because it's boring, but Home Office policy is set by the Home Secretary. The policy is set by politicians. Yep. If the policy goes wrong, that is ultimately a political matter, not a civil service matter. The thing, if there's one thing that really worries me about the honour system, and I think most of it is good news for people that have toiled away quietly, is really the House of Lords. And I read one stat this week, I think it was in the Times, about around 10% of Tory peers have made a donation to the party. So we're not talking about the person helping out at the food bank and getting an OBE after 30 years and so on and so on. We're talking about the influence of big money in party politics.
Are you of the view that people are essentially buying peerages?
No, I'm not of the view of that, because I think that would be a little bit simplistic, but there is a bit of a crossover on the old Venn diagram between donations and places in the House of Lords.
Well, that's buying them, Peter, isn't it?
I think...
surely that's influence. If you suddenly become a donor of the Tory party, next minute you're on the red benches. I mean,
on the other hand, are you saying that people who have donated to the party in the past are thereby excluded from ever being considering, irrespective of what other wonderful things they may have done?
Exactly, and of course, some people donate after getting a peerage, and that creates a lot of questions, which is a polite way of putting it, because there has been a nod and a wink in the appointments process if you make a donation after becoming a Lord.
Alice, it's pretty hard, though, isn't it, with the honours list, because whoever gets nominated, some people aren't happy about it.
Yeah.
You can always find flaws in everyone, because we're human beings. But is it something that we need to reform?
Well, I think, the media will always create a fuss over certain figures. I think, just to some extent, it is fair to question some of the members of the political elite who are obviously going to be on the honours list, and it can feel unfair. But we also have to remember that over 60% of those people who are receiving honours are just, Brits, ordinary Brits who are helping their community. And I think there's something very valuable in that.
So something to be said for tradition, Mike?
Well, I think it's a very flawed system. Peter's pointed out the Rycroft situation. It's an absolute disgrace, isn't it? This man has not been very good at his job. So he should have been sacked. So instead of being sacked, he's elevated to, the highest elite levels of our society.
What about Peter's view that that's not his responsibility, that actually that was a responsibility for the Home
Well, he could
Office?
have turned it down, and if somebody had said to him, are you really happy about what you've been doing over the last 2 years? I mean, remember, when he took up the job, I think there was something like, in 1 year, 2,100 crossings across the Channel.
Yes.
It's now 40,000. Let me tell you a story about how politicians use the honours system. One of the first things Tony Blair did when he got in, and I think Alistair Campbell may have had some influence on this, was give Geoff Hurst a knighthood. He's the only man who's ever scored a hat-trick in a World Cup final. It was in this country in 1966. What did? They gave Geoff Hurst a knighthood, and he's been Sir Geoff Hurst ever since. But there's 11 men in a football team, that win a football match, the World Cup final, and it was done purely as a kind of look at us, populist.
Yeah, but this is the kind of complaint I was talking about. Like, whoever gets nominated, someone's going to have an issue with it.
Exactly.
Alice, do you have a particular thought about the Rycroft situation which has been raised? You know, do you think that because, as Mike argues, you know, he just wasn't good at his job, he should have been disqualified from being considered? Or do you think that actually maybe it's not all about that? There are other factors to consider when it comes to this.
Yeah, of course. I think, Mike, you made a very interesting point, though, about bringing up Tony Blair, because I think we see a lot of kind of...
Sir Tony.
Yes, of course. Don't
in
forget.
the long term, like many of the reforms that he made to our political system, such as in the House of Lords as well.
Yes.
Now we can see in hindsight that it has, you know, hugely damaged trust in our political system.
Yeah.
Same with devolution, same with, you know, the Supreme Court. There have been massive constitutional changes made under Tony Blair.
Yeah,
and only
massive.
now we are seeing these fruits of them. And I think for many of them it's very
So reform then?
But Alice,
well, no, I wouldn't say reform. I'd say that we have to actually look at our tradition, and we have to call back to tradition, because many of Tony Blair's reforms come from a place of progressivism and modernism.
Or just discount people.
Yes, but not only that, but also trying to pretend that we're a very
discount
different
people
country than what we are.
who don't deserve
But
it.
people wanted Tony Blair to be discounted on the basis of war crimes.
Exactly.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, but that's a very subjective thing, because people have different views on it. Peter, you wanted to come in on that.
Well, yeah, I do want to cut across Alice, apologies, but in terms of Tony Blair, surely what he did in terms of kicking out most of the hereditary peers was a good thing, because that's an aid to democracy. And I think having several hundreds of hereditary peers, people making our laws because of their birthright, would be unjustifiable in the 21st century.
The issue is that what is the House of Lords now, except for, of course, people, as you mentioned, who are just big donors to parties and who are receiving peerages because of their connections to political parties.
It's a lot more than that. There are
the truth
crossbenchers.
is, it's never going to be democratic, the House of Lords, as long as
I'm trying to work out where you're coming from then here. Do you think it should be abolished?
No, I don't. But what I'm trying to, I guess, point out is the fact that inherently it is an undemocratic chamber.
Yes.
So I don't think there's much point trying to democratise it, as
Mike, thoughts
Tony
on...
Blair tried to do with experts. So
thoughts on the House of Lords? What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't abolish the House of Lords. I think that's a really ridiculous, stupid thing to do, because if you do that, you're going to have a Senate. You're going to have a second chamber, which would hold up legislation. If the Lords would go back to what they were set up for, which is to analyse the stuff coming through the House of Commons and see whether it'll make it or not, whatever. Yes. I wouldn't abolish it. On the honest thing, Sir Brian May should have happened 10 years ago. That man
is that just because you're a Queen fan? Do you see what I mean? It's so subjective, a lot of this.
No, yes, I'm a Queen fan, and I'm more of a Freddie Mercury fan. But if you've ever heard Sir Brian May play his guitar and all that kind of stuff, it gives you so much pleasure. But also, I've interviewed him several times, and he knows more about badgers and he knows more about astrophysics than he does about playing a guitar. He's an amazing bloke, and I'm glad he got it. And sorry, I've got to give a mention to Chris Kamara, my old pal in football, Cammy, OK? He got, let me get this right, an MBE for services to football, and Cammy went through a difficult period as a broadcaster. He had to stop broadcasting because he had a voice complaint, but he still went on with it. So people like that should get them. It uplifts us all to say anybody can get one if they try hard enough and do enough. The people I dislike are the Rycrofts of this world who know they're going to get one at the end of the day, whether they do their job properly or not.
I suppose that's the point, isn't it, Peter? That people are resentful for these things being given out without merit, I suppose.
But I think that's a truism. The question is, does someone like the former head of the Home Office deserve it? Every viewer would agree with the idea that it should be on merit only. I think the point about civil servants, you know, I don't want to talk about it all night, but civil servants are there to deliver what politicians ask of them. If something is a bad idea, then the person that should be accountable for that is a politician. And there's no point in having a big argument now about Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like he implemented that bad idea very well. Yeah. So maybe that's the way.
Badly.
Maybe that's the way we should look at it. And we don't have any more time.
How did Michelle Mone get into the House of Lords?
We don't have any more time here. But after 5 unsuccessful attempts at forming a power-sharing agreement, the Northern Irish government in Stormont is set to enter 2023 without a functioning executive, despite elections that were held back in May. I'm going to be talking to journalist Mick Fealty to get the latest and discuss whether new elections will be needed in the new year.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK will be wet and wintry in the north, brighter and milder in the south, though there will be some showers. Here are the details. Starting off across Scotland, and here it'll be a cloudy and wet start to the new year with outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow, and some icy patches too. Also cloudy and wet for much of Northern Ireland. Here too there may be some sleet or snow, though mostly confined to the hills. Heavy showers to watch out for across northwest England. As these push through on the brisk winds, we could have some very strong gusts. It's going to be a similar picture as we look across Liverpool and into Wales. Here the overnight clear skies will give sunny spells through the morning, but also some squally showers. Meanwhile, the weather for the East Midlands first thing on New Year's Day is looking dry and often sunny for most, albeit quite blustery with temperatures down a touch on some recent days. That's the story as well across East Anglia. Whilst it will be a dry and bright start, showers will push in during the day with temperatures rising into double figures. Plenty of showery rain for more southern counties first thing on Sunday. The strong winds will gradually ease through the day, though some of the showers will be heavy. The showery rain, sleet and snow will continue for northern parts. Drier and brighter further south, though some showers in the southeast. And that's how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. As we head into 2023, one issue seems to be lingering for the people of Northern Ireland, that of a functioning government. Despite Assembly elections having taken place back in May of this year, no agreement for any power sharing between the DUP and Sinn Féin has been achieved, with the most recent failure occurring nearly 4 weeks ago when an attempt to elect a speaker was blocked by the DUP. As a result of the ongoing problems, the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, has agreed to implement a 27% pay cut from next month in a bid to force both sides of the aisle to get the devolved government back on track. But should Stormont still be sitting in limbo by mid-January, the Northern Ireland Secretary will be obliged to call a fresh election to take place no later than mid-April to end the stalemate. Well, to offer more insight, give us the latest, I'm delighted to be joined by the founding editor of the Slugger O'Toole blog, Mick Fealty, coming to us live from Gloucester. Mick, thanks ever so much for joining me today. Can I ask you, Mick, about this deadlock that we have at Stormont? Given the cost of living crisis, given that we do need a government up and running, is this going to be the thing that finally forces it, finally breaks this deadlock and allows us to move forward?
Well, I think, look, to try and give a little bit of explanation and background to your viewers, what you really have to understand is that what was at stake in the Assembly elections last May was the operation of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and particularly the dilatory effect it's had on internal market, or supposed to be an internal market, from their suppliers in Britain. Now, most of that hasn't hit hard yet, but that was the key issue amongst all unionist parties. And I think because the DUP was associated with that deal, with Brexit in general, they were penalised and then finally lost only 3 seats, but it was enough to allow the Sinn Féin to become, as of right, the First Minister of Northern Ireland for the first time. Now, all of this really hangs on whether the UK government can do some kind of a deal with the protocol such that allows the DUP to go back into government and elect that first Sinn Féin First Minister. They say they're up for it. They say they will do it. But really, it doesn't depend on anything that happens in Northern Ireland. It really depends on those UK-EU negotiations that are currently ongoing.
So you don't think that the DUP are being intransigent about this? You think that they've been kind of forced into a position where they simply can't reignite the executive under the circumstances of the protocol?
Well, look, Andrew, the truth is they are being intransigent, but they don't really have any choice. The electorate are very clear about, the unionist section of the electorate are very clear about this, and they know that if the DUP, or the DUP knows that if it backs down on this issue, really their lives will not be worth living. Of course. Because they will be further punished for being weak in the face of this challenge. So they have to do it. They have to be intransigent. And it doesn't matter how much money you take off the MLAs or how many times you force them to go through another election. If they back down on this, they're finished.
And of course, it's not just about looking weak, is it? There is the principle here. I mean, unionists appear to be utterly united in this opposition to the protocol, because, of course, really, it's not about, you know, the fact that businesses in Northern Ireland are subject to EU regulations or about the economic implications. It's really about the constitutional implications, isn't it? It's really about the symbolism of a hard border in the Irish Sea. Would you share that view?
No, I do share that view, and that is what it looks like from a unionist point of view. Of course, we have 2 sets of electorates. In fact, actually, the recent census shows us there's actually 3 forms of the electorate now forming in Northern Ireland. The unionist electorate, who are really caught up about the protocol and, as you say, the constitutional issue around trade. You've got the nationalists, who are basically consolidating around Sinn Féin, and the moderate form of nationalism, the SDLP, suffered really badly in May. They lost more seats than any other single party. But emerging in the middle is this new, if you like, constitutionally blind alliance tranche, and they actually gained 9 seats, which was a massive step forward for them. There is no sympathy amongst nationalism for unionism's dilemma, and this kind of sectarian standoff is something we're familiar with. We've seen government collapse for 3 years under a Sinn Féin boycott over the Irish Language Act. So we're in familiar territory here, but nevertheless, nobody in Northern Ireland can really pull the levers to make this happen. It really does fall down to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and Number 10 to try and get some kind of a deal that sufficient that the DUP can sell it to that wider unionist electorate.
I mean, you mentioned the Alliance Party there. I know Naomi Long from the Alliance Party has made the case that we need reform at Stormont. I mean, is there a case to be made for reform, given that, as we have seen, whenever Sinn Féin or the DUP decide not to participate, then the whole thing comes crumbling down? We had this with Sinn Féin between 2017 and 2020, and now again with the DUP. So is the system at fault here? Is there something we could do about that?
I think it's a lot. Yes, is the short answer to that. And proper reform was made. The provision was made for that in the Good Friday Agreement back in 1998. And it's never really happened other than a negotiation shop between the DUP and Sinn Féin. And of course, in 2007, when the St Andrews Agreement was implemented, that only strengthened their grip on the centre. What's really happened since then, though, and it's not just the rise of the Alliance Party, it is actually, you can see it from the recent census figures. There is no longer a Protestant majority in Northern Ireland, but nor is there really an encroachment by Catholics, or those people who call themselves Catholics these days, on a majority. That is almost completely out of bounds. What's happening is there's almost 20% of the population now who vote for parties of the centre, but who also say, I'm neither Catholic nor Protestant. And so once the electorate is very dynamic, we are caught in this historic, sectarianized, polarized politics, exemplified by this control freakery of both the DUP and Sinn Féin, who will tolerate no internal opposition, and where there is no internal.
I'm so sorry. I am going to have to stop you there because we are out of time. But thank you for joining me. Coming up in the next hour, my panel will be back to talk about the front pages as they drop hot off the presses. See you then.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Andrew Doyle, in for Mark Dolan this New Year's Eve. And we've got a jam-packed hour lined up for you. My all-star panel and I will be taking a look at tomorrow's front pages as they land hot off the presses. Plus, we're going to be debating whether Christianity has a role in modern-day Britain and if New Year's resolutions are a waste of time. I'll also be looking back at some of the biggest moments in politics from the last year with UKIP Deputy Leader Rebecca Jane. And I'll look at the future of British aristocracy in the aftermath of the death of Her Majesty the Queen. But before all of that, here's the news with Ray Addison.
Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. 2 men have been charged with the murder of a semi-professional footballer who was killed on Boxing Day in Birmingham. 23-year-old Cody Fisher was fatally stabbed at the Crane nightclub in Digbeth. 21-year-old Cammy Carpenter and 22-year-old Remy Gordon have also been charged with affray. They'll appear before magistrates on Monday. A third man has been bailed while West Midlands police continue their inquiries. Pope Francis has paid tribute to former Pope Benedict, who passed away this morning, aged 95. The pontiff described his predecessor as noble and kind. Earlier, King Charles sent his condolences, recalling Pope Benedict's constant efforts to promote peace and goodwill. Coming head of the Catholic Church in 2005, Pope Benedict stepped down in 2013, the first pope to do so in 600 years. Former Archbishop of Canterbury, the Most Reverend Dr. Rowan Williams, spoke to us earlier about Pope Benedict's visit to the UK.
The first time that a pope had officially visited the United Kingdom, certainly the first time that Pope and Archbishop had stood together at that shrine. And for me, it was a moment of extraordinary depth to be alongside this very, very great, very substantial man and be able to pray together and, if you like, to discover our unity at the deepest level.
4 lionesses who won the Women's Euros earlier this year are among those recognised in the New Year Honours List, the first to be issued by King Charles. Captain Leah Williamson has been made an OBE, whilst Lucy Bronze, Beth Mead and Ellen White have been given MBEs. GB News presenter Anne Diamond has received an OBE for services to public health and charity. And Queen guitarist and animal welfare campaigner Brian May has received a knighthood. The government has confirmed that anyone travelling directly from China to England from the 5th of January must now show a negative COVID test before departure. There are no direct flights from China to Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, but the government says it will work with devolved administrations to ensure measures are implemented. It's amid concerns of surging cases in China following an easing of restrictions there. France, Canada and the US also have introduced similar rules. In Yorkshire, Scarborough Council have been forced to cancel tonight's New Year's Eve celebrations thanks to an unexpected visitor, an Arctic walrus. It's thought to be the first time one's been spotted in the county. The animal has drawn crowds to the harbour on New Year's Eve, wildlife experts saying it's likely taking a short break before continuing his journey north. We're on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Andrew.
We've gone just past 10 p.m. as we count down to 2023. So coming up this hour, I'm going to be joined by my all-star panel, former editor of Labour List Peter Edwards, political commentator Alice Grant and journalist and broadcaster Mike Parry. And we're going to be debating whether Christianity has a place in modern-day Britain and if New Year's resolutions are a waste of time. And plus, we're going to be taking a first look at tomorrow's front pages as we get them. At 10:20, Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane, will be joining me to discuss the biggest moments in politics of 2022, and we'll take a look at what we can expect from next year. And at 10:45, I'll be chatting with Dr. Rakib Ehsan about whether, as a society, we are moving away from a culture of duty and stoicism towards a new one of victimhood and identitarianism. All this and more coming up this hour. And the first of the newspaper front pages have just dropped, and I've got them with me now. So here we're going to start with the Express, and the headline of the Express is "Good Times Are Coming," and this is Rishi Sunak's message of hope. He's promised there are better times ahead as he's revealed a New Year's master plan to kickstart Britain's recovery. I feel better already. The Daily Star has led with their campaign to give dry January the elbow to save British pubs. They're calling this wet January. That's what they're going with. And then the Sunday Telegraph has led with news that nuclear power plants may be forced to shut down over a windfall tax. And they've also included on their front page a large image of Pope Benedict, who passed away today. So as we leave Christmas behind us and prepare for the new year ahead, I wanted to reflect on the fascinating poll from last month, which revealed that for the first time ever, Christians now account for fewer than half of the population of England and Wales. The data released by the Office for National Statistics revealed that while every major religion increased from 2011 to 2021, Christianity had fallen to 46.2%, down from 59.3% 10 years ago. And despite the decrease in those who identify as Christian, Britain still finds many of its laws and public policy influenced by the religion, with even our head of state considered to be ordained by God himself to rule over us. And with the death of the former Pope Benedict XVI earlier today, it seems like an apt moment to ask the question, how important is Christianity in modern-day Britain? Alice, how important is it?
Very important to me personally. I'm a Catholic, and I think that my values, which are entirely based on my religion, have formed me in so many ways and have helped me so much personally to heal from things, and also have given me a sense of identity.
I think you'd have to be a horrible cynic to not find that really appealing and valuable. But of course, it's subjective, isn't it? What you're describing is your experience and the reason why religion is important to you. But do you think as a society as a whole, in a pluralistic society, it should be important?
I don't think it's subjective. I think there is obviously objective truth, and that's something that in our society we've lost a sense of, hence why we see so many issues, and especially among young people. But I'd like to say that in my generation I see lots of us returning to more traditional values, and especially, which can be found in the Christian faith.
Peter, are you a religious person yourself?
Yeah, I'm a member of the Church of England, and I think clearly what came out of the census was mixed. But what I'd also say is that Christianity was still the largest group in Britain by miles, although it's dipped below 50%. But also Christianity is growing globally. There's a huge rise of evangelical churches in Africa and partially in America as well. Of course, there are particular challenges for the church in Britain about relevance, but I'd actually defend the role of all faiths. Of course, Christianity has been the dominant one in Britain, but I defend the role of all faiths in public life because we're quite an open, tolerant society. And I made a quick...
That's interesting. Can I come in and just ask you what you think about Islam? Because I don't know if that really quite gels well with our Western society, which is based on Christian values.
I believe, of course, Christianity and Islam can gel, of course. And I think... I don't know if you're hinting at perhaps more conservative interpretations, but if you look at leaders of both the Catholic Church and the Church of England, they've been at the forefront of leading out to other faiths, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do. So, of course, Islam, Judaism, Sikhism and Hinduism, which tend to be the other big religions, absolutely have a place. And it was interesting, although the then Prince Charles has perhaps moved away from this 10 or 20 years ago to talk about being defender of the faiths, plural, which I think no one would really disagree with that idea, because I think, and the point I was going to make is faith not just plays a hugely positive role, but it's kind of knitted into the fabric of our society. And I made a quick note, it's not just churches and mosques and other places of worship, but schools, hospitals going back several centuries, and today food banks. Faith has been responsible for not just worship, but this kind of flowering of community involvement over several centuries.
Mike, do you agree with Peter on that, or do you think that maybe it's just outdated now and we're moving into a more secular world?
Well,
I'm a Christian and I'm a practising Christian. I don't very often get to church.
Right.
But what I do practice are the values of Christianity. So I'm a great TV fan. You watch Columbo, you know, you watch all these detective series.
Yeah.
I can't work out how somebody can kill somebody else just purely because they've got a grudge against them, you know what I mean? To me, that's anathema. You don't take somebody else's life, you know, that's part of the Christian philosophy. So that might sound a bit trite, but what I'm saying is I try to live my life along the Christian principles I learned as a kid.
But do we need religious principles in order to have those principles? Atheists know it's wrong to kill.
No.
One second, we'll go to Mike first and then we'll continue.
Sorry, Az. All I'm saying is, I think Christianity is the most decent form of society. And if people practice Christian thoughts and beliefs without having to go to a church, I think it makes us all, able to exist in a more stable society. Mosques are filled up all the time, and people say, oh, Church of England churches are, people are not in them anymore. I don't agree. It's a philosophy, Christianity, and I follow that philosophy.
But we're not necessarily, Alice, a Christian society anymore. But we are pluralistic.
But firstly, I actually disagree with religious pluralism. I don't think it can work. I think it creates confusion and chaos ultimately and can't function. And I think in some areas of even London, we can see that there will always be tensions between religions, especially when it comes to religions which hold views on women, which we fundamentally disagree with in this society and have done for hundreds and hundreds of years, etc. It's a massive debate, but it's interesting that you pointed out the kind of, the issue about morality, because I think the biggest thing that we're losing slowly in our society is a sense of right and wrong, is a sense of what is just and what is true. And that creates so much confusion, especially within young people. I see it destroy my generation
what is the
in so
solution
many
to that?
ways.
I mean, you say that you don't support the idea of plurality in religion.
No, but
isn't the solution...
But that's because not every religion has a moral conduct.
Yes, but you can't just wipe out the religions you don't like.
Well, that's not what I'm advocating for at all. I just think that we need to stand up. No, I think that as Britain, we need to stand up more for Christianity in this country.
I agree.
Because our morals
and defend it around the world.
Exactly, and our morals in this country come from Christianity, and that's so important.
Is that right, Peter? Has there been a fear among politicians and those in authority to assert the values of Christianity for fear of offending other faiths?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think...
Well, I think that's absolutely...
Sure.
Let Peter answer before we...
But wasn't there talk earlier this year about
don't counter a point he hasn't made. He hasn't made the point yet, so let's wait till he makes the point before you argue against.
I'm passionate about, Andrew.
Yes, but you also... Yes, you must listen to other people as well. Peter, make your point first.
It's getting ridiculous, isn't it? The cancelling of Christianity.
Alice, Peter's point first, and then yours.
OK, Peter, go ahead.
You're so passionate you've forgotten how conversation works. Peter, you go first.
I haven't been muted, I am still here.
Yes.
There's two things, right? I think Parliament has played a really positive role in encouraging interfaith relations, just like all religious leaders have. I think every Christmas there's a story on TV and in print media about, quote-unquote, Christmas being cancelled. Christmas has not been cancelled, and Hanukkah has not been cancelled, and Eid Mubarak has not been cancelled. And the reason this is rolled out, it tends to be because either one school out of several thousand or one local government, one council out of several hundred has misinterpreted national government guidance. You can have a nativity, you can play Christmas music, you can celebrate Eid, you can celebrate Hanukkah. Like, most people, even atheist people, and I have atheist friends, are accepting and understanding of the place of religion, even if they disagree with it themselves. OK, to prevent Alice having an aneurysm, you can now come in to respond.
Well, no, OK, so I understand where you're coming from with the kind of mutual understanding of different religions, but ultimately, what is religion except for giving you a kind of a moral structure to your life? And the issue is that different religions have different ideas of morality, and there has to be one truth. For example, according to some religions, I should wear a certain outfit which hides all of me. I shouldn't have a voice. I should be completely submissive and obedient to the men in my life, to the point where I do not have legal rights at all.
Yeah.
So the issue is that there will always be religions with very different and sometimes
Which
morally
religion do you mean
wrong.
then? Because you're hinting.
Well, you mean Islam?
Well, I think, of course. I mean, it's kind of.
Do you mean? But
what I'm saying is that if as a country, if we don't fight for what is important to our society, which come from our Christian values...
But there are a lot of Muslim women who would disagree with you. They would say they're free to dress as they will. And
perhaps, but I think we also have to look at the facts, and you look at Muslim countries and how women are treated in those countries, and you're looking at Christian countries or in Europe and how women have been treated here for centuries. So, you know, as a young woman, I think I can speak very firmly on this issue, because this is something we see in Iran. The women here who are taking off their hijab.
Let me just bring Mike in, because I haven't had a chance to talk.
So, you know, it's a very topical...
Look, 200 years ago, 250 years ago, Dr. Livingstone, I presume, we tried to impose Christianity on other parts of the world. And then we discovered, actually, a lot of parts of the world don't really want it. So I'm all into do as you want to do and don't try and influence other people to do what you want to do. One of the reasons that the Middle East is so smashed up and people are coming in their hundreds of thousands to the West is because we smashed up their countries along the lines that we know better than them. We don't. I'm a Christian. I follow the Christian faith. I'm not asking anybody else to follow the Christian faith if they don't want to, and neither would I expect anybody to come to me and say, Christianity's not good, follow my faith.
So you're talking about secularism. You're saying
I am.
Secularism protects religious freedom in
Yes, I am. Yes, absolutely.
Isn't that fair, Alice? I mean, that seems like the solution.
I disagree. I think that secularism has produced a society which is gradually forgetting moral conduct and right and wrong. And we can see this with gender ideology. We can see this with alarmism, like climate alarmism, which is kind of taking over and becoming dogmatic. If we don't hold firm to faith, if we don't have strong moral values in this society,
but you can have your faith
we will believe anything, and we will become hysterical.
You can have faith and still believe in secularism, can't you?
Yeah, you absolutely can. But anyway, we'll never resolve this tonight. It's a very passionate subject. But coming up, after the break, I've got UKIP Deputy Leader Rebecca Jane, who's going to be giving her roundup of some of the biggest moments from politics in 2022 and our hopes for the new year.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. This last year will most likely go down as one of the most chaotic years in politics, from the ousting of a democratically elected Prime Minister to a cutthroat Tory leadership conference that saw a leader emerge before resigning 44 days later, only to be replaced by the runner-up. 2022 was anything but ordinary for Westminster. But while the Conservatives saw themselves lose ground in the polls to left-wing Labour, the likes of UKIP and Reform UK saw their membership soar by those unable to find a political home in the mainstream arena. And as we head into the new year, what lies ahead for our political landscape? Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane, to talk through some of these major stories this year. Good evening, Rebecca. Can I ask you first?
Hi, how are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you very much. And I wanted to ask you to begin with, what are the highlights from your perspective of this year in political terms?
Well, I think that the main highlight for me was that the Conservatives really showed themselves up for who they actually were, and what an absolute farce they made of the whole year. Thank goodness that they are, hopefully, fingers crossed, on their way out. I don't see that they've got any chance of rectifying it, and that is the highlight for me.
But you say the Tories are definitely on the way out. I mean, the polls are absolutely clear on that. You know, they got trashed in the local elections earlier in the year, and they've had all this turmoil regarding the leadership. But doesn't that leave the opening rather to Labour, insofar as Labour are pretty much definitely going to be in next time? Keir Starmer's definitely going to be the Prime Minister. You can't be happy about that, surely?
Well, I'm still very hopeful that that won't be the case, because
Really?
come January, I do. I know that it's an absolutely massive long shot, but I think that if anything this year has shown us is that anything can happen. So I do have a plan up my sleeve for January. We've already started the motions of talking to centre-right and splinter parties to try and get some potential traction behind one amalgamated party for people to have a very clear and definitive alternative. So that would be my ideal dream scenario. I don't think it's a complete and utter victory for Labour as yet. We've got a good while to go.
But you're talking about the smaller parties sort of collaborating on this. Didn't Reform rule out a collaboration with yourselves?
Well, it'd be lovely if they did rule out, but they're just ignorant. So they don't actually make any response whatsoever. And what we constantly keep on seeing, and what I constantly get, is that the people actually want us to talk, and all we're saying to Reform is let's talk. They completely and utterly ignore every opportunity to do that, which is absolutely ludicrous, because they're not going to win anything by themselves.
So you must be very frustrated, because the smaller parties, ultimately, while we have the first past the post system, there isn't really any chance of things changing in any significant way. And of course, it's not in the interests of the two major parties to bring in proportional representation.
Exactly. I know, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, do they? Which is very ironic given the time that we've just had. No, you're absolutely right. It doesn't favour us. But like I say, anything can happen. But, I'm only 3 months into the post, so I am going to be heavily optimistic. I have to be. It's my job to be. But I genuinely feel that the public are crying out for an alternative, and that they don't want the Conservatives and they don't want Labour. Not really. They do want something that is stronger than that. And I genuinely believe that if we all come together, we absolutely can give that to the public. But, call me naive if you want, but let's see what we're talking in another year's time.
Well, I would have to agree. Politics is unpredictable and can change very rapidly. But just looking back, I mean, you mentioned that you felt that this year the Tories were exposed for what they were. What specifically do you mean by that? I mean, when are you talking about the way in which they had this continual revolving door of leaders and chancellors, and the fact that they couldn't fixate on a particular policy without undermining it a few weeks later? I mean, is it just the capricious nature of the party that you're talking about, or is it something deeper?
I think it's that and something deeper. Rishi Sunak, for me, has got an agenda, and that doesn't fit with my agenda, or rather the lack of one. He operates for the 1%, whereas we operate for the 99%. But what we've consistently seen with the Conservatives is that they have constantly given us inadequate and inauthentic leaders. You know, it started with Boris Johnson, and now people are all of a sudden going, oh, bring back Boris and he'll save the world.
Well, what do you think about
this?
Were they right to oust him in the way they did, though? You know, I mean, it did seem like a sort of major Julius Caesar moment. Do you think that that might have been handled a bit better?
I don't think that they could have handled it a bit better, because it was all so public and it was all becoming so apparent of how terrible it actually was. So I think that they had no option. And, you know, for me, I know that people don't particularly like to talk about the whole Partygate scenario, because obviously people think that it's quite insignificant. To me, it was quite a big deal, because it really showed up how inauthentic they were actually being. We've lost all trust this year in our government, and that's the thing that we have to try and get back next year. So they had to get rid of Boris. They might not have done it in the best and most perfect way, but there was never going to be a good way to get rid of him. And then, obviously, what happened after that belongs in a ridiculous Hollywood movie.
Well, sure. I mean, a movie about Liz Truss would be fascinating. I mean, but I'm just trying to think. You know, when it comes to Liz Truss, I mean, really, she got the short end of the draw, didn't she? I mean, do you feel sorry for her in any way?
I do a little bit, yes. I think that I know that I can definitely say that even UKIP is nothing in comparison to the Conservative Party, but even I underestimated my position. So I absolutely believe that she completely and utterly underestimated the job. And the public platform that she got put, she didn't do a good job. I don't support her in any way. But the public platform that she got put on, and I genuinely think that she was hung out to dry. So I do feel a little bit sorry for her, but you know, you shouldn't have gone into the arena, not really.
But I mean,
you weren't prepared.
But she was pronouncing various conservative ideas, which a lot of people were shocked by, because the Conservatives haven't felt very conservative for a while. And of course, her plan for economic growth, or at least this attempt for economic growth, that was laudable, wasn't it?
She said whatever she had to do to try and get people on side. I don't think she believed in anything that she actually said. In fact, I think that she's a bigger... Yeah, I genuinely don't believe it. I said it all the time. I sat on GBNews for weeks talking about it. You know, we talked about the leadership debates. I said I don't believe a word that's coming out of her mouth. She's saying whatever she has to do to get in the position, and then she thinks that she can muddle her way through it. And she didn't. She got shown for what she was. So, but I do have compassion for her, because I do think that they well and truly went for her. But I think that she did it as part of her own making.
I mean, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, surely, you know, she spoke to Kwasi Kwarteng. They came up with this plan. This was Trussonomics. You know, I mean, it's surely more likely that she sincerely believed that this would be the way to kickstart the economy, but it spooked the markets in a way that she didn't anticipate. Isn't that more likely than it was just her trying to sort of wheedle her way in?
No, like I say, I think that she was saying what she thought that we wanted to hear. And I think that she thought that that was getting people on side. I thought that her version of what has unfolded was slightly better than Rishi's. But I don't think that it was appropriate for the time or the place. But I don't think that she really thought it through. I don't think either of them did. And that's why the situation unfolded as it did.
And in terms of the major issues of this year politically, of course, the war in Ukraine has loomed large. And of course, this is it had a major impact on our cost of living crisis. Do you have any sympathy for Rishi at all? I mean, he's become Prime Minister at this time. The war is raging, cost of living crisis escalate, inflation going through the roof. It's not easy for him to bring this back, is it? Could anyone do it?
No. Not under the Conservatives. No, not in the slightest. Do I have any sympathy for him? Not really. Again, you know, a little bit like Boris, everybody's pretending like it'd be great if he comes back. I'm sure it'd probably be better than the two alternatives we've now been left with. But I don't think that he is the Lord and Saviour that everybody professes him to be. He was there during COVID. It was him and Boris making these decisions. The furlough, not being transparent and open with actually how much this was all actually costing our people, is one of the reasons why we are here today. So I struggle to have sympathy, because if he hadn't have been in position as he was when COVID was unfolding, maybe I'd have had a lot more faith in him. But actually, because him and Boris created this absolute storm together, No, I don't have any sympathy for him. And I think that there's nobody left in the Conservative Party. I did quite like Kemi Badenoch. I did have quite a lot of appreciation for her. I think that she would have probably been the best candidate, but because she genuinely seemed to be listening to people, whereas these lot don't. They say whatever they think that we want to hear.
Well, that's very interesting. Thanks very much, Rebecca Jane, for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it. So coming up, we've got the papers shortly with our panel's reactions, plus are New Year's resolutions a complete waste of time? My superstar panel and I will be debating that and more very shortly. See you in 3.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan Tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. More front pages have just dropped. And starting with the Sunday People. So the headline here is "Patients die before they get a bed." The paper citing NHS medics blasting the Tories for a, quote, Dickensian A&E crisis. The Sunday Times on New Year's Day report on an in-depth research which reveals millions of voters remain undecided before the next general election, giving hope to embattled Conservatives. And the Sunday Mirror have an exclusive coronation invite for race row royal aid. The paper is revealing that Lady Susan Hussey will be invited to King Charles' coronation after she was sacked last month for insulting charity boss Ngozi Fulani. What do we think about that? I mean, this has been rumbling on, hasn't it, Alice, this royal aid story? Was she unfairly treated?
Susan Hussey?
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, there's always these, big kind of hysterical fusses created in the media. I think that, to a certain extent, yes, really, but
Yeah.
you know, things pass over and...
Although this story keeps coming back. I mean, Mike, do you have any feelings about this?
Well, I think it was more a generational thing than anything else. I mean, you know, Lady Susan, I think she's 86, isn't she?
83, I think.
Sorry?
I think she's 83.
83, OK, fine. I think she's about double the age of the other person involved in this, you know. What this story is all about, by the way, the background to this is that William and King Charles fell out massively over this. William, big supporter of Lady Susan Hussey, and thought his father had gone a bit too far in making her get so public. And look, everything she did was right. And didn't that show to us the extent to which the royal family are opening their minds to, you know, to diversity?
Are they, or are they overreacting?
No, I think they're overreacting. What I'm saying is that this is clearly a peace pact between William and his father saying, right, we did the right thing, we got out of the way. No way was she ever going to be excluded from the coronation because she served the king's mother for so many years.
Well, may I say, come on this?
Yes.
So, Lady Hussey made a mistake and Lady Hussey lost her job, but Lady Hussey apologised. The apology was accepted by Ngozi Fulani. We spent a lot of the evening talking about British values and things like Christianity. So if we believe in these things, we must believe in the idea of forgiveness.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
The apology is accepted.
Very good point. Now, we're going to move on. Despite the religious roots of New Year's resolutions, most people make their resolutions only to themselves, focusing purely on self-improvement, which may explain why such resolutions seem so hard to follow through on. The top 5 resolutions in the UK are exercise more, lose weight, get organised, learn a new skill or hobby, and live life to the fullest, which is quite a vague one. But despite our best intentions, according to recent research, only 46% of those who commit to resolutions are actually successful. So with such a high rate of resolution failure, are New Year's resolutions a waste of time? So I'm going to bring in my panel here to discuss that. Peter Edwards, Alice Grant and Mike Parry. Mike, we're going to start with you on this.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about this?
Now, New Year resolutions I've never really been into because I know they fail so quickly, you know what I mean? Something you think up drunkenly on New Year's Eve. However, I have a New Year resolution for 23. I'm going to learn how to play the guitar. Yes. And I'm going to write a hit song before the end of 2023.
So this is a double resolution. First you have to learn the thing, and then you have to write the song.
I'm a very good lyricist. I've always been very good with words. I've been a journalist for 45 years. When I was 8 years of age, I won the prize for writing the poem in the school magazine, you see what I mean? So I've been very good at lyrics and words since then. What I'm now going to do is learn how to play the guitar. And I swear to everybody watching this show, and to yourself, and to Alice, and to Peter, I will provide and create a hit record before the end of 2023.
So before the end of 2023, you're going to have a big hit. It's going to be top 10, are we saying? Is that the limit?
No, much higher than
Number
that.
one?
It's not going to be average. It's going to be the very best.
You're going to be the new...
I admire your determination.
Thank you. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take at least 2 guitar lessons a week, OK? I've already sourced...
Can you play it at all? You've got no...
No, I've never picked up a guitar in my life.
You've never picked up a guitar?
But I've sourced a guitar teacher and I've bought a guitar. Well, so I know it's going to happen.
You'll forgive me for being sceptical, but, you know, good luck to you. I mean, I hope it happens.
Yeah.
Alice, do you have any New Year's resolutions this year?
Yes, mine are really to just increase in, I guess, my faith. I really want to become better at being a Christian and live my faith out more fully, pray more. So they're quite wholesome.
And again?
But also, I do want to actually... work on my physical fitness as well.
OK, so a bit of both. OK, spirit and body.
Where does a slight drink on New Year's Eve come into the Christianity, please, Alice? I want to know what sort of Christian you are, because it's not banned. It's not banned.
If you're a Catholic, you're mostly drunk.
Yeah,
that's basically how it works.
There you go.
What about you, Peter? Any resolutions for yourself?
Not particularly. I mean, Alice is extremely laudable, but I must confess to your viewers, I've had a couple of lagers during the show. But
Outrageous!
I've lived to tell the tale.
Well, it is New Year's Eve.
There's a slight pink blush to my cheeks.
I was about to say, I wondered where the saloon lounge flush in
I
your
think
face
that is New Year's Eve. We'll forgive you for that.
I must say, on resolutions I've made new, but looking at your top 5, if they're to go running more and get thinner, I mean, I can't get any thinner. You can't get any thinner. Or I won't be here.
No, exactly. so you don't want to do that. But living life to the full is quite a good one. Yeah, you know, what does that mean?
At least 3 of them are ridiculous. Living life to the full, the last one. The first 2, equate to each other, don't they?
Yes.
What do they say? Lose weight and keep fit.
Yeah.
That's the same thing.
Well, not necessarily. You can be fit and larger. The body positivity movement has said this to us.
No.
Time and again.
If you're going to start boring people to death about how often you get into the gym and start rowing and all that kind of stuff, you're going to lose weight, aren't you?
Yes.
They are balls, aren't they? These. But a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm going to join a gym in the new year." Do you know that 70% of all new gym subscriptions in January peter out by March?
Of course they do. And look, but there is something to be said for making the attempt and making the effort to improve yourself. And I mean, I understand you're saying you're absolutely committed. And of course, you'll take all this back if you don't get the hit by the end of the year.
No, this time next year...
You will have it.
Invite me onto your show and I will sing it to you personally.
We'll put that on the back burner.
What about you, Mr. Doyle, being a bit diplomatic in this conversation?
Well, whether I have any New Year's resolutions, I haven't really thought about it yet. I'm running out of time, haven't I? I've got about 2 hours before...
Less than that.
Less than that before the end of the year. I don't know, really. Maybe I'll have a hit single to rival...
I doubt it very much.
Well,
it's only
together, the new Carpenters.
Only a very small number of people can do what I'm going to do.
I don't know what that is, though.
No, I'm going to produce a hit record. Do you know what? I've always known I was a genius, but I didn't know what at.
Yes.
So, for instance, if I'd have got into a race car when I was 16, I'd probably now be Formula 1 world champion, right?
Yeah.
But I was too busy pursuing journalism, the thing I loved and have done ever since.
Yes.
If I'd have picked up a golf club at the age of 14, I probably would have won the Masters, OK?
Well, maybe it's about confidence then, rather than just persistence, you know?
No.
Maybe I'll take up origami. How about that? And I'll become a master or a grandmaster at chess. I can be the new Garry Kasparov, something like that. Would that satisfy
very boring.
you, Peter?
There's a gulf between origami and a chess grandmaster.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yes. We're all
what a boring ambition.
We're all living up to what you said at the start of the show, which is try and be optimistic even in tough times.
Well, exactly. And I do think there's something to be said. I mean, even dry January, and I know people scoff about it, but actually the idea of even if just for a month, you detoxify, you don't overindulge, that's a positive thing to commit to. I'm not so sure about the Daily Star's front cover is talking about how they want it to be wet January.
Yeah.
And they want to get rid of that because they want to support the pubs.
Yes.
But isn't there something to be said for giving up, even if it's just for a month?
No.
Even if you fail?
No, it's a pointless gesture. Why are you doing it? Because it's a pointless... Look how good I am. I gave up drink for a month in January. No.
Oh, no, it's not virtue signalling. It's a genuine attempt to try and be a bit healthier.
No, it's not.
But there's no need to go from famine to glut. When you read these stories in a paper about the oldest people in the world who live to 110, it tends to be...
They normally smoke 20 cigarettes a day.
Well, not quite, but it tends to be, folk in prosperous countries like Italy who have one small glass of red wine with their supper.
Yes.
Everything
moderation.
I suspect if you headlined the Daily Star, everything in moderation, it wouldn't sell too many copies that day.
Is the problem, Alice, that we as a society, we are quite gluttonous, aren't we? I mean, we do overindulge and then we're looking for a quick fix.
But that's what Lent is for, really. So I'm going to be feasting most of January. At least
I don't think that's the idea, is it?
Well, not
you overindulge so that Lent is easy.
I think that's a great idea.
That is exactly
well
the
done,
idea.
Alice. Lead the way.
You were saying just now you wanted to be physically fitter. I don't think that's going to work if you're doing tequila shots every morning.
Well, it's
they're jumping protein bars.
The time before. Because Lent comes so quickly, so I want to be... Lent is the time for penance, but I'll be enjoying January.
Well, I think people should enjoy it, but I also really do value this idea of giving things up.
I do actually agree. I think it's really important that we do learn as a society to be, have more self-control.
Temperance, right?
Temperance.
It's quite old-fashioned.
I think Lent is brilliant.
Moderation.
You should give up something at Lent, and every year I give up moderation in Lent.
Well, yes, again... I'm not convinced, but I'm going to really give some thought now to what Peter has said and actually try and come up with some sort of resolution, because I think it's actually important for self-discipline to try and throw yourself into it and actually do something. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we're going to have to move on now, but coming up after the break, I'm joined by Dr. Rakib Ehsan, who'll be explaining whether we, as a society, are moving away from the stoicism that Her Late Majesty the Queen held so dear, and instead replacing it with a new aristocracy of victimhood. Join me in a minute.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there. Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight with me, Andrew Doyle. The Queen's death this year was a momentous event. Author Joanna Williams recently wrote a Spiked magazine article where she argued that the Queen's passing marked a cultural shift away from duty and towards victimhood, a victimhood personified in the elite worldview of Harry and Meghan, which she argues despise our traditions. But is this a fair assessment? Are we really moving away from a culture of duty and stoicism towards a new one of victimhood and identitarianism? Now, joining me is social commentator Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I want to ask you first of all about this idea of whether the death of the Queen has really marked a new era, a kind of shift in ethos when it comes to these ideas of duty.
Well, Andrew, I think when it came to the passing of the late Queen, there would have been many Brits who would have felt those values that she embodied, duty, responsibility, grace, restraint and stoicism, they're increasingly dying out, that they're not in particularly high supply in modern day British society. I think that there is a degree of pessimism involved in that. I live in a community where I see those values every day, if truth be told, especially, interestingly, in traditional ethnic minority communities. So I think that it's very important that we do remain optimistic, but at the same time, we have to be wary of the fact that we have this modern anti-racism, which I feel is increasingly represented by a form of elite social activism, which is ultimately about peddling grievance-fueling narratives to boost one's own social status and financial position, as opposed to facilitating meaningful change in modern-day British society.
I mean, so much of the discourse of anti-racism, which once, of course, meant opposition to racism, and we could all get on board with that, but the phrase anti-racism is now about the detection of racist power structures that may be invisible to some people. And what happens, of course, is you end up with the situation, for instance, with Lady Hussey, where Ngozi Fulani detected racism, but racism may not have been there at all. Is this because being a victim, in of itself, now has a particular cultural clout?
Well, I think that it definitely, there's that cultural clout dynamic there, as you say, Andrew. And I think some people see it as a way of heightening their own public profile. I felt that the whole Lady Susan Hussey and Ngozi Fulani affair was just an example of manufactured outrage. I've been asked on countless occasions where I'm from, and it's very easy for me to say that I was born in Hammersmith, I live in Luton, I'm of Bangladeshi and Indian origin. It only takes a few seconds. And I feel that actually, if you're quite open about your own identity, that can lead on to quite intellectually stimulating and interesting conversations between people that belong to different ethnic and religious groups. And I think in a way, when you have those conversations, of course, there may be misunderstandings along the way, but that actually helps build a more cohesive and resilient society in the long term.
Where do you think this has come from? I mean, I've had a number of experiences where I've seen people basically say to young people, you will always be oppressed. You know, some campaigners have said to young women, you will always be the victims of the patriarchy, or campaigners saying to young ethnic minority people, you will always be the victims of racism. Similarly with gay people. Where has this sort of thing come from? And is it not actually counterproductive to those young people and their mindset?
I think it's incredibly counterproductive, Andrew. I think that if people are truly, genuinely interested in young ethnic minority people, for example, progressing in their own country, you don't want to tell them incorrectly that our economic, social and cultural systems are deliberately rigged against them. And now, I'm not saying that there aren't improvements to be made in terms of improving equality of opportunity. Mind you, I think when it comes to those conversations, we need to talk more about class. To be honest, which has somewhat been lost on the modern left. But I do feel that for all of Britain's flaws, it is one of the most successful multiracial democracies in the world. And especially when it comes to the provision of anti-discrimination protections, especially on the grounds of race, ethnicity and religion, it outperforms many other multiracial democracies, especially those in Europe, such as France, Germany and the Netherlands.
Is the problem partly that victimhood appears to be rewarded if you can claim to be a victim? I mean, just to give an example, the way in which the LGBT acronym has now become LGBTQIA+, and effectively you've got straight people with a kink identifying into that community, into an oppressed class. Well, why else would they be doing that unless there come certain rewards of being the victim?
I think one interesting dynamic that I've come across on a number of occasions is that quite often it's privileged people doing that. So I think that they're quite insecure, interestingly, in their own position of economic privilege. And I think that they try to associate themselves with groups that may be seen as being oppressed in order to shake off that privilege. So I think that it's almost a middle class insecurity there. Quite interestingly, which is quite responsible for much of the grievance politics that we're seeing in modern day Britain.
And do you think, I mean, we started this before you arrived by talking about Joanna Williams's article for Spiked about this sanctification of victimhood and this new culture. And she specifically focuses on the phenomenon of Meghan and Harry. And they might fit in very well to what you're describing here. These incredibly privileged people, well, actually, the most privileged people in the world, lecturing everyone else about privilege and claiming to be victims. And is it really, have they become sort of the poster people of this kind of mentality?
No, absolutely. I think that when I talk about modern anti-racist politics increasingly being about elite social activism, which involves individuals looking to heighten their own social status and quite possibly their own financial security, I think that the Sussexes embody that. If truth be told, I watched the docuseries all 6 episodes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
This thing is absolutely remarkable. For example, that the Commonwealth of Nations, a voluntary association, was described as the British Empire 2.0. Yes. There was also the royal family. In my view, I think in some cases the royal family was unfairly vilified in the docuseries. And I think that a really important point that I'd make is that when you look at the late Queen, for example, she was a champion of interreligious dialogue, reaching out to non-Protestant Christian denominations as a Supreme Governor of the Church of England. And you have King Charles III referring to Britain as a community of communities, referring to himself as a defender of all faiths. I actually think that the royal family, through Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, they've done more for social cohesion in modern-day Britain than some of these modern anti-racists ever could, Andrew.
Has Stoicism then died? I mean, you know, in that docuseries, which I fortunately haven't watched, but I've read enough about, I know that Harry and Meghan are exposing basically everything, and they're showing very intimate photographs continually, assuming that we have any interest in their love affair, which I personally don't. But they're doing all of that, and yet you've got the Queen, who kept her cancer diagnosis a secret until her death. I mean, it's just a world apart, just in terms of that stoic way of life. Is that something we can just consign to the past now?
Well, I think that people will deal with difficult experiences in their life in various ways. But I do feel that the one thing that I found particularly unsavoury with Harry and Meghan is exposing those family feuds and tensions in the most public way imaginable. For me, I'm quite traditional minded, but I think that there's many British people who may well feel that there are things that happen to them within their own family structures which are unsavoury, gone through difficult experiences, but they would rather keep that confined within the family and sort them out within their family units, as opposed to, how do you say, airing out their dirty laundry in the public.
Well, very interesting developments. Dr. Rakib Hassan, thanks so much and Happy New Year. And thanks for the audience at home watching tonight. Happy New Year from all of us here at GB News. Please remember, stick around for Headliners. I'm going to be hosting Headliners next, and that's the paper preview show where comedians take you through the next day's newspapers and headlines. That's coming up in just 1 minute with my wonderful panel, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. And it just remains for me to say, I hope you had a great new year. Have a fantastic 2023, and we'll, of course, be seeing you next year on GB News, the People's Channel. Farewell.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK will be wet and wintry in the north, brighter and milder in the south, though there will be some showers. Here are the details. Starting off across Scotland, and here it'll be a cloudy and wet start to the new year with outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow, and some icy patches too. Also cloudy and wet for much of Northern Ireland. Here too there may be some sleet or snow, though mostly confined to the hills. Heavy showers to watch out for across northwest England. As these push through on the brisk winds, we could have some very strong gusts. It's going to be a similar picture as we look across Liverpool and into Wales. Here the overnight clear skies will give sunny spells through the morning, but also some squally showers. Meanwhile, the weather for the East Midlands first thing on New Year's Day is looking dry and often sunny for most, albeit quite blustery with temperatures down a touch on some recent days. That's the story as well across East Anglia. Whilst it will be a dry and bright start, showers will push in during the day with temperatures rising into double figures. Plenty of showery rain for more southern counties first thing on Sunday. The strong winds will gradually ease through the day, though some of the showers will be heavy. The showery rain, sleet and snow will continue for northern parts, drier and brighter further south, though some showers in the southeast. And that's how the weather is shaping up during tomorrow morning.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 PM on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every